Everyone knows Wyatt Earp, the gunslinger, the lawman, the myth. They know the shootout at the OK Corral. They've heard the legend echo through the West. But behind that name was a family, 9 brothers and sisters, scattered across war, dust, and silence. Some fought for the Union, some hunted buffalo on empty plains, some died before they ever grew old, and one sister lived long enough to remember them all. While Wyatt became a story told in every saloon, his brothers faded into the shadows of their own lives, fighting, building, wandering, or simply surviving. They carried the same blood, but not the same fate. Their triumphs were quiet, their endings were cruel, and their legacy almost forgotten. Because history only remembers the man who stood in the street with a gun, not the brothers who fell beside him, not the sister who kept his badge. If you still believe the forgotten deserve their place beside the famous, subscribe. This isn't a story, it's a reckoning. Number 6. Newton Earp. Before Wyatt ever drew a gun, Newton Earp had already seen war. He wasn't just a brother, he was the first son of Nicholas Earp's first marriage. Older, steadier, already a man when Wyatt was still chasing shadows across a dirt road in Iowa. In 1861, Newton joined the Union Cavalry. He rode through fire, Missouri, Arkansas, Mississippi, a soldier with nothing to prove and everything to protect. He came home in silence. No medals, no glory, just calloused hands and eyes that had seen too much. He tried farming. It didn't last. The West called louder than the land. So he moved. Kansas, Wyoming, Nevada. Not chasing gold or trouble, but carving a quiet life out of frontier dust. While his younger brothers became legends and lawmen, Newton was a builder, a carpenter, a man who named 2 of his sons Wyatt and Virgil, not out of pride, but loyalty. They ran for constable once, Newton and Wyatt. Brothers turned rivals on a ballot box. Wyatt won. Newton shrugged and stayed his brother's keeper until the end. He never fired a shot in a saloon. He never stood at the OK Corral. But he stood for something stronger, a man who endured without needing to be known. He died in California in 1928, aged 91. Weeks later, Wyatt followed him, and so the elders passed, not with a bullet, but in peace. He built homes and buried ghosts. He didn't wear the legend, but he carried its weight, brick by brick, until the end. Number 5. James Earp. He wanted to fight like the others, to wear the uniform, to prove himself. And at just 19, James Earp stepped into the Civil War with a heart full of duty and a future shattered before it ever began. At the Battle of Fredericktown, the bullet tore through his shoulder. He didn't die, but the war took something all the same. An arm that never healed, a body half broken, and a silence that followed him for the rest of his life. While Newton moved west and Virgil led with fire, James wandered. Illinois, Iowa, Montana, California. He ran saloons, played cards, followed Wyatt like a shadow that never quite touched the light. He tried being a lawman once, in Dodge City, under Charlie Bassett. But it didn't stick. He wasn't made for gunfights. Not anymore. When the Earp brothers rode into Tombstone, James came too. But he didn't wear the badge. He ran a saloon instead. And on the day of the OK Corral, he stayed inside while the others walked into history. Some say it was the old wound that kept him back. Others say he had no taste for blood. But when Morgan was gunned down in cold blood, James stood tall in a different way. He rode with Wyatt, guarding Morgan's coffin across the desert. No guns drawn, just grief, and a promise that his brother would not be buried alone. Later, when the vendetta ended and Wyatt faded into myth, James settled into the dust of California. No headlines, no stories, just a man who never found peace, but stayed loyal to the end. He died in 1926. No children, no legacy but memory. He was the brother who never made the legend, but carried its wounds in silence. Number 4. Virgil Earp. He wasn't the loudest, he wasn't the youngest, but when the town turned savage, he was the one they followed. Virgil Earp stood taller than the myth. Before Wyatt became a name, Virgil was already wearing the badge. Deputy U.S. Marshal, acting City Marshal of Tombstone, the one who gave the order at the OK Corral. It was Virgil, not Wyatt, who told the cowboys to disarm. It was Virgil who took the first shot. And when the smoke cleared, it was Virgil who limped away with a bullet through his leg, and a war just beginning. 2 months later, they tried to finish him. Shotgun barrels waited in the dark as he walked back from the saloon. They blasted his left arm to ruin, but Virgil didn't die. He kept breathing, kept moving. Carried a modified 6-shooter in his right hand and patrolled the streets with his arm in a sling, even when Morgan was assassinated, even when Wyatt went hunting. Virgil didn't chase vengeance. He carried the pain. He had already lost once, during the Civil War. When they told his wife Ellen he was dead, she remarried. Their daughter grew up without him. He found out decades later, met her with grey in his beard and grief behind his eyes. He never complained. In his later years he returned to law, marshal in Colton, saloon keeper in mining towns, always one step from the grave, but never bowing to it. He died in Goldfield, Nevada in 1905, not in a shootout, but wrapped in pneumonia and memory, asking only for a cigar and for his wife to hold his hand. He was the one who gave the order and paid for it in bone, silence, and years the legend never told. Number 3. Morgan Earp. He was the youngest of the fighting three. Not the leader, not the myth. Just a brother with a sharp aim and a fire he hadn't yet learned to fear. Morgan Earp wasn't chasing glory. He was chasing his brothers. Into Dodge City, into Tombstone, into history he never asked to become part of. When Virgil took the badge, Morgan stood at his side. When the cowboys refused to disarm, Morgan loaded his weapon without flinching. And when the streets of Tombstone erupted in smoke, Morgan didn't blink. At the OK Corral, he was just 30, shot across the back, blood soaking through his coat, but he stood tall until the last shot was fired. The town saw a lawman. His family saw a brother who had stepped into a fight that never really ended. They tried to warn him. He sent his wife, Louisa, away for safety. He knew the danger. He just didn't run. And then came the night of March 18th, 1882. A saloon, a game of billiards. Morgan bent over the table, lining up a shot, and a bullet came through the door behind him. It tore through his spine, dropped him where he stood. Wyatt ran to his side. "I can't stand," Morgan whispered. "This is the last game of pool I'll ever play." He died in Wyatt's arms, his blood staining the floor, his name never reaching the age of peace. They carried his coffin out of Tombstone. James guarded it. Wyatt seethed beside it, and that was the day the vendetta began. He never chased legend, but became its breaking point the moment he fell. Number 2. Warren Earp. He was the last of the brothers, the one with something to prove and no one left to teach him how. Warren Earp grew up watching the others ride out. Newton to war, Virgil to duty, Wyatt to infamy, Morgan to death. By the time he reached Tombstone, the streets were already stained with blood. He hadn't earned the badge, but he wore the name. And sometimes that was enough to get a man killed. He wasn't at the OK Corral. They kept him away. Too young, too hot-blooded, too much like fire on dry wood. But when Morgan was gunned down, when Virgil was crippled, Warren showed up ready. He joined Wyatt on the vendetta ride, riding through the desert with death on his breath, avenging brothers with cold lead and grit. For a moment, he was one of them, a fighter, a blood brother in the storm. But the West didn't forget the reckless, and Warren never knew how to be still. He drifted after Tombstone, stage driver, ranch hand. Sometimes a lawman, always angry. They said he picked fights in saloons just to feel alive, that he bragged too much about being Wyatt's brother, that he wore the name like armor, but underneath, he was already cracked. And in 1900, the fire caught up. Wilcox, Arizona. A feud with a cowboy named Johnny Boyette. Drinks, words, a challenge. "Get your gun," Warren said. "I've got mine." But when Boyette came back armed, Warren stepped into the street and opened his coat. No gun, just pride, just the kind of silence that gets a man shot. The first shots missed, the fifth didn't. Warren dropped in the dirt, his name echoing louder than his breath. There was no Wyatt to avenge him this time, no vendetta, no justice, just dust. He tried to wear the legend like a shield, but it burned through him before the story was even over. Number 1. Adelia Earp. She never wore a badge, never drew a weapon. She wasn't in Tombstone or Dodge or the saloon on the night Morgan fell. But when all the guns were quiet, Adelia Earp was still standing. She was the baby of the family, the youngest, the only sister who lived long enough to be remembered. While her brothers hunted outlaws and chased law across broken towns, Adelia was raising 8 children in a house full of chores, noise, and the distant hum of headlines that never said her name. She married at 15, moved across Iowa, Kansas, California, always one town behind the bloodline, but never too far to forget it. She wasn't part of the legend, but she kept it. In a box of photographs, in letters, in the pistol and badge Wyatt left behind when he died. When everyone else was gone, Newton, James, Virgil, Morgan, Warren, even Wyatt. Adelia was still there, still writing, still remembering. And when Wyatt grew old and tired, he would visit her. Not the outlaw, not the icon, just a brother, sitting on a porch beside the one person who still knew who he was before the world decided for him. She lived into the 1940s, long past the Wild West, long past headlines. A grandmother in Los Angeles who had once seen buffalo hunts, heard gunshots in the distance, and buried every brother she ever had. She never stood in the legend, but she remembered all the men who died inside it. Not every name gets remembered. Not every child lives long enough to make the world notice. 3 of them never got the chance. Mariah Ann, Martha, Virginia, daughters of Nicholas and Virginia Earp, sisters to the men who would fill saloons and graveyards. Mariah died in infancy. Martha was only 10. Virginia made it to 3. There were no revolvers, no headlines, no bullet holes in the spine, just fevers, fragile bones, and the kind of death that came quietly in those years. The brothers grew older, built names on dust and vengeance, but the girls, they vanished before memory even had time to shape their faces. Their names are carved in brief, buried in old census records, handwritten in corners of family Bibles. No tombstone ever made them famous, but they were part of the bloodline too, part of the silence behind the noise. They died before the myth and were forgotten before the story began. 9 brothers and sisters, soldiers, lawmen, drifters, builders, mothers. Some died with bullets in their backs. Some faded quietly behind saloon doors. One left a badge behind. And one remembered them all. None of them chose the myth, they just lived beneath it. Wyatt's name rose, and with it, their own names disappeared into death records, folded letters, and photos left in forgotten drawers. But names are not what hold memory. It's the silence they left behind. The tracks across Kansas, the one-armed lawman still patrolling, the brother guarding a coffin at dawn, the youngest daring a bullet to come. It's the woman who kept the pistol and the photo because no one else would. And the brothers who stood beside the myth until the world turned quiet again. This family wasn't made of legend. It was made of weight, of wounds, of loyalty that never needed applause. They're gone now, all of them. But the blood they shared still speaks, and today, you've heard it. Subscribe if you believe that legends are not made alone. They are carried by those who walk beside them and buried by those who love them.